The Miami Dolphins will make history in 2025, and their dance partner for doing so is Set. We're exploring that and more here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack. And I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today on the show, some details about the Dolphins and their 2025 schedule are starting to emerge, including the dance partner for the team's international trip to Spain. The Dolphins most recently played internationally in 2023 in a 7-point loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, hoping for some better results this time around. And quite frankly, the Dolphins have not had a great record in playing internationally as a whole. So, we'll be exploring the release that the team put out as it pertains to the matchup, which has been announced for Week 11 of the 2025 NFL season on November 16th. And we're also going to be exploring a new member of the Dolphins secondary, Kendall Sheffield, which I cannot promise I will go this entire show without accidentally calling Kendall Fuller at least once. I'm going to try my best. But another Kendall in the backfield after last year's Kendall Fuller experience. So we'll talk a little bit about Kendall Sheffield and his journey to the Dolphins. And then a fun quirk about the Dolphins and their travel commitments and how it compares with the rest of the league is where we'll bring things home today on Locked On Dolphins. So let's start with the Washington Commanders, who made it to the NFC Championship game last year. Obviously a team that in year two under Dan Quinn with a very young football team is facing a very fascinating outlook. And Jane Daniels looked electric and was the best season Washington has had in probably 30 years. Year one under Dan Quinn. And the question for Washington is whether or not that lightning in a bottle last year they're able to capture and maintain, or is the year-to-year improvement and regression going to catch up with a team that had a lot of, kind of one-year players, and they selectively chose to go after and retain some of that talent, and then they chose to revamp the offensive line. It's become a Laramie Tunsil versus the Dolphins storyline. So there's a lot of stories here that go with this Washington versus Miami international game in Spain. Here's the release from the team. It was put out within the hour. Grab your passports. The NFL announced today the Miami Dolphins will be playing against the Washington Commanders at the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium in Madrid, Spain in Week 11, which is November 16th, 2025 at 9:30 a.m. It is the NFL's first ever regular season game played in Spain. It is the Dolphins' 8th regular season international game and 4th in a new country. They've played in Germany, 2023, the United Kingdom in 2021, 2017, 2020, or 2015, 2014, and 2007, and Canada in 2008. The game will also mark the Commanders' second international game after playing Cincinnati in London in 2016. This is the first meeting between the Dolphins and Commanders since 2023. Dolphins won 45-15 on the road. That was the big, they run shock with the hitch and the outside fade that Tyreek Hill, I believe it's the Dolphins' first offensive possession, hit a 70-yard home run on that play. Dolphins lead the all-time series against Washington 10-6. Fans interested in attending can learn more about the official Dolphins fan package that's available at MiamiDolphins.com. So you get a chance to play standalone game. Obviously, it's going to be the 9:30 NFL Network kickoff. So if you have NFL Network, you'll have a chance to watch this game. And that's one of, I think, 10 total places you need a chance to watch the Dolphins play games this or watch every NFL game this season, just between YouTube TV and Peacock and CBS and Fox and NBC and ESPN. The list goes on and on and on. NFL Network, the Dolphins will play. Confirmed at least this one game on NFL Network. But the matchup with Washington, I think, is really it should be a good showcase for Miami. I'm glad that they're catching this opponent a little deeper into the season as compared to anytime you play those electric and dynamic quarterbacks and you've got playmakers and explosiveness to go with that on offense, especially with all the new that the Dolphins have in the defense this year. It's a lot of youth, but I mean they totally remade the safety room. They totally remade the linebacker room. Corner, we're figuring out where your footing is. You're going to figure out who's going to match up with Terry McLaurin. Zach Ertz is a guy who can chew you up against zone coverage, even though he's an older player. Like the fact that you're getting this matchup against Jaden Daniels and company deep into the season. You know, you're past the midway point. And if the Dolphins were to indeed get their bye on the other side of an international trip, I think that would be attractive. That would make it, a week 12 bye hypothetically. And it gives you a chance to kind of reset and go through the last 6 weeks or so of the regular season and hopefully push towards a successful campaign. But if you told me you drew Washington week 1 or week 11, I would take week 11 just because of the unique challenges there. And then obviously, this is a team that you really only have last year's body of work with this coaching staff and the talent that they have. What does the evolution look like for them? I think there's some mystery as far as their first offseason after putting together a successful year. What do they retain? What do they do differently? What are their new core principles based on the kinds of players they went after? And the Dolphins are going to have to juggle those talking points for a number of opponents that they're going to catch on the schedule in the first month of the season. But Washington not being one of them with how explosive Jaden Daniels is, I think is a good thing. It's a win. So that's the story on the Dolphins game in Spain, Madrid. First time ever for the NFL. Dolphins versus Commanders. That is week 11 official. 9 a.m. or 9:30 a.m. NFL Network on November 16th. So we got a little time before then and now. And one of the things that we have to figure out between then and now is what the heck the secondary is going to look like. So we're going to look at the new member of the Dolphins secondary, Kendall Sheffield. That's next here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, it's never been a better time than now to get in on all the action for yourself. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live during the game. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have even more ways to play smart and win big than before. Which players show up in big moments? How could tracking their trends potentially help you find that winning bet to make you a winner throughout the playoff game? If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same-game parlay? And you could apply a $200 bonus in bonus bets to add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits over at FanDuel. So if you're new to FanDuel, now is the perfect time to sign up. You can head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Not really a basketball fan, but pouring one out for the Heat with obviously making the play-in, and that pick that was theirs, had they not made the play-in, jumps up in the lottery to number one. I can't imagine. I cannot imagine wanting a lottery, like a draft lottery for football. And I know a lot of people that are in my space think it would be the greatest thing ever. And just that variable of chance, I don't know. I feel like you should be very results oriented, right? And the results of the Dolphins secondary that the team didn't seem to like because they got rid of Kendall Fuller. They're moving on from Jalen Ramsey, who Omar Kelly put a story out for the Sun or for the Herald just yesterday, talking about how kind of Mike McDaniel's player empowerment strategy from this past year really backfired with both Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill, and then other players started to follow their lead, and then it didn't matter how many times you find them, it didn't change the behavior throughout the course of the season, and it's part of the reason why they're looking to move Ramsey. So a lot of unknown and uncertainty with the secondary. And maybe Kendall Sheffield can provide some enlightenment. Here's what we know about Kendall Sheffield, who the Dolphins signed. I think they made the announcement of his signing yesterday. He was in camp over the weekend with rookie minicamp. He got an invite, and a few of the people that I talked to said he looked pretty good, and so I wasn't overly surprised to find out that after what sounded like a couple of impressive days, he got his name called and he got signed to the offseason roster, and the Dolphins adding a sixth-year player to their ranks. He's a former fourth-round draft choice by the Atlanta Falcons. He played his high school football at Ohio State. He's born May 30th, 1996. So he's going to turn 29 in 2.5 weeks. Happy proactive birthday to Kendall Sheffield. Drafted 111th overall in the 2019 NFL Draft. And through his first 2 seasons in 2019 and 2020, he started 20 games and played in 29. He was a pretty meaningful snap taker for Atlanta earlier. He played over 1,200 snaps defensively. And there were some injuries that caught up. He missed the entirety of the 2022 season. Last year was with the Jets and played in 6 games, just short of 100 snaps on defense, which was the most he'd played since 2020. Statistically speaking, okay, probabilities of Kendall Sheffield being a needle-moving player in your secondary, let's be honest, they're not so good, right? We're talking about a guy that's played less than 200 snaps since 2020 defensively. Kind of the same for Artie Burns, though. Like Artie Burns came in and looked really good week 18 for Seattle, playing in the same scheme he's going to play in here, but has not been a guy that's played, I don't think he's played 300 snaps since 2020 either defensively. So you got a couple of guys like that, guys that clearly have some talent, guys that clearly had athletic profiles that were conducive to being NFL defensive backs, but it never really clicked for whatever reason, for one way, shape, or form. But for Kendall Sheffield, I watched the tape that he put on last year during his time with the Jets, and predominantly a nickel, and listed at 212, like 5'10", 212. That's a big DB. I think that was the first thing that stood out, because the Kendall Sheffield I remembered from Ohio State played at like 190. So playing at a bigger size, and I think it shows. And I think he's somebody who's competing for potentially an opportunity to be in the nickel conversation for the Dolphins, potentially play special teams. He's played a lot of special teams throughout the course of his career. He's played almost 500 career special team snaps to go with the 1,400 snaps he's played on defense. And he played 48 special team snaps for the Jets last year, and then in 2023 played another 78. So we're talking triple-digit special team snaps over the last 2 seasons. So it's kind of the outlook for Kendall Sheffield. But when I watched him, I saw a player that had good physicality. I saw a player that had good support and sufficient tackling ability. So I think there's a baseline potentially of a special teams type player there. The coverage transition stuff was kind of where I thought, like, between his footwork and when he's dropping out of the nickel and he's responsible for the flat, he's got a high-low, and he fades these things, and he's carrying his zone landmarks high because he feels the route that's developing behind him. And then it's time to transition and kind of trigger and drive downhill and rally to the football. I felt like that was sufficient level zone dropping ability. But then you got these opportunities where he's up in the face, and it was against Jacksonville and Houston, and he's playing press, and he got cooked for a long touchdown, I believe, by Brian Thomas in the slot, where I don't necessarily see a really attractive man coverage profile player. And that's fine. You play matchups with some of your guys, but it kind of underscored for me. And then you saw him when he was isolated and not had his hips open and was zone dropping, but when he was kind of doing more of his, not zone drops, but once he hit his landmark and then it was kind of time to anticipate the play and react to the throw or the routes developing, some inefficiencies there. So I think he is probably going to be a long shot challenge to be an answer for anything that the Dolphins need to have filled. Just my personal assessment from the 92 snaps that I watched of him play in 2024. But I saw enough appeal here where if you told me he ended up making the roster because maybe you felt like something clicked into place, if you felt he was going to be a special teams guy for you because he has that physicality, I would say, okay, like I could see where there's potentially a pathway that doesn't involve him answering your cornerback needs to fulfill a role on game days. I don't expect a particularly high ceiling, but I can't dismiss it entirely. So that's Kendall Sheffield, who I don't think I called Kendall Fuller. I think I'm okay. So I'm going to do the George Costanza, and I'm going to wrap on top. And we're going to transition and go to the last talking point that I have for today around the Miami Dolphins. It's pertaining to their travel schedule, a fun statistic, if you will. That's coming your way next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. This stat every year always hits me right between the eyes. And to some degree, the Dolphins did it to themselves, right? They are the southeasternmost franchise in the league. So if you want to go play anybody that's not the Bucs or the Jags, you're going to have to travel a little bit, right? Like, it's not like the Eagles and the Giants are a 90-minute bus ride up 95, and then the Commanders are a 90-minute bus ride down 95 for you to play, two of your however many road games, 8 or 9 road games you're going to play in a given year as divisional opponents, right? Like, the Dolphins are the isolated team. But bookies.com put together the miles traveled for all 32 franchises this year. And thankfully, the Dolphins are not number one on this list, and they are lower on this list than they were last year. But they are in the upper quartile, to quote Jim Irsay, in honor of Jim Irsay. They're in the upper quartile of NFL teams for miles traveled this upcoming season. As a matter of fact, they rank 2, 4, 6, 8th. So they're the last team in the upper quartile. 24,409 miles for the Miami Dolphins this year. Ranks 8th in the NFL. Behind the Colts at 25,089. The Atlanta Falcons, 25,947. The San Francisco 49ers at 28,363. The Jacksonville Jaguars at 29,006. The Seattle Seahawks at 31,302. The LA Rams at 34,832. And the LA Chargers at 37,086. On the other side of that spectrum, the team that travels the second least amount of miles this year is the team that you're looking up at in the AFC East. That team from Western New York, 31st on this list, 10,546 miles for Buffalo. So Cincinnati takes home the least amount of miles. They're under 9,000 miles, Dolphins at 24. So respectable amount, and obviously a great deal of that for Miami is involved with an international game that kind of changes the perspective and the outlook, and we know that game is happening in Week 11, kind of right in the middle of the season. So you would hope for Miami's perspective, knowing that the travel commitments that they have, you're either going to be resting on the front end of that or the back end of that. And if it's anything other than that for Miami, I'd be pretty upset with the scheduling quirk that's going to come as a result of the Dolphins playing the first ever game in Spain. So, bookies.com has the Dolphins 24,409 miles traveled this year, a healthy amount. And as Adam Schefter points out, the total NFL miles traveled this year is over 600,000 miles. So the NFL will be very well represented across the world this season, and the Dolphins will be a part of that. And the challenge from here is where exactly this roster goes and turns to be the best version of itself. And we will continue to wait for the resolution you're looking for on Jalen Ramsey. He's not the only big name right now that's kind of lingering as a potential trade chip. We'll see what happens in Cincinnati, for example, where Trey Hendrickson, who's been amongst the league's best pass rushers for the past 5 years or so, is looking for either a new contract or to be traded, and the Bengals don't want to give him that. So it'll be really interesting to see. I expect none of these big landmark moves will come before June 1st at this stage, just based on the timing on the calendar. But is there a team that might be in the corner market that maybe is waiting to see what happens with Hendrickson? There's some additional layers, I think, that maybe muddy the waters for the Dolphins, other than their own salary cap motivations at this stage of the game, which I expect are the primary reasons why we haven't seen the Ramsey traction get done yet. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Tuesday. I will be back again tomorrow. More Miami Dolphins talk coming your way. Hope to see you then. Go Fins.